I was selling experimental aircraft. A lot of my clients would come into town and spend 2 weeks working on their airplanes, getting flight training, and they had nowhere to stay but a Motel 6. So I bought a couple of houses, I outfitted them, and rented those out. It's definitely a huge learning curve.
Yes, I'm going to be on more OTAs, but at which point does it become too much without it necessarily bringing enough incremental revenue to justify the additional distribution?
You can't get a booking from a website that you're not listed on. And if it doesn't cost you to list on it until you actually get that booking and are paying a commission, why not list there?
Airbnb launched their marketplace, trying to almost replicate a PMS and even a dynamic pricing tool within the OTA itself. Do you think it's only something that will benefit RBOs?
Bookings are down across the board in most cities. Professional managers might have more tools to know what to do in those scenarios, and RBOs just saying, I'm just going to try and wait out the storm and see what happens.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. And really, we bring here operators, investors, leaders, founders in this space so that they can tell us about their stories, the lessons that they have learned along the way, as well as perhaps some of the mistakes that they have either made or seen other operators make, so we don't make those same mistakes ourselves. Today, I'm super excited here to be with Heidie. Heidie is actually the executive director at VRNation and the co-founder at ASTRHO, and someone that we've been in touch with and have known each other for a few years already, and someone that's super involved in the vacation rental community, the vacation rental space. Has been on many sides of this business, on the investor side, on the host side, on the supplier side, on the operator side. So a very unique perspective about this industry. And as I said, someone very involved with everything that has to do with advocacy, as well as industry, education and professionalism. So that being said, hey, Heidie, thanks so much for being here. And before we get started, where are you taking the call from?
Yeah, thanks for letting me join, Sebastian. I'm in my home office in Bend, Oregon, and we're trying to weather a pretty gnarly storm right now. So hopefully my Wi-Fi holds up.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's going to be fine. And so why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about, how did you end up in the vacation rental space, coming from the aviation world before?
Yeah, it was an interesting take. It's always crazy to hear people's stories, how they got started in the short-term rental world. And mine began 25 years ago. I was selling experimental aircraft, and a lot of my clients would come into town and spend 2 weeks working on their airplanes, getting flight training, and they had nowhere to stay but a Motel 6, or not the greatest option for lodging for a 2-week period. So I bought a couple of houses, I outfitted them, and rented those out to my clients to give them a cozy, more home-like experience. And then by about 2006, I found VRBO and started hosting on those platforms as well. So it's definitely a huge learning curve back then with very few resources.
Yeah, I can imagine. What surprises you the most? We're gonna get into the rest of the story, but when you look at like the evolution of the industry and like everything that you see now versus when you first were getting started as a host yourself, like if you're a new host today versus a new host back then, what is it that surprises you the most about like where the industry is at?
I think it's how much we have professionalized. And even while many people like to say that we are still the Wild West of lodging and hospitality, we've come a long way already. And the resources that are out there to help people professionalize are greater than they've ever been, from technology to education opportunities, conferences. There's new conferences popping up, it seems, every year. The networking opportunities, just that ability to really elevate your hosting business on whatever scale you're looking to do. But 25 years ago, it was kind of truly the Wild West, and we were out on our own trying to figure things out.
Yeah, no, it's definitely impressive. And we'll talk more, of course, about that sort of professionalization of the industry, and how you are actually contributing to that as well with your involvement in VRNation and whatnot. But so, okay, so you start buying some properties, and then, what happened next? Like, when did you get involved with the property management side of things?
Yeah. So I took a stint of about 10 years living in Park City, Utah, and I worked for a ski resort out there. And most representatives that work for ski resorts have to only sell the mountain and ski lift tickets. I sold that, as well as 5 hotel buildings, 2 of which were kind of the condo hotel or early vacation rental style. So I learned really early on. I worked closely with our head of revenue management, how to contract with all the different OTAs, and then back then the ski wholesalers. So it was kind of a great entry level education on how to sell vacation rentals the way that the hotels were marketing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that morphed into a career with a property management company in Park City, where I started as their director of sales and marketing. So I really got that firsthand experience of what the business looks like. We worked with about 150 luxury homes, as well as 6 boutique hotel rooms. So we got to get very creative with how we marketed those properties. When I brought all of the same um, thought process and contracting and everything that we were doing at that ski resort, we brought to the property management world. So
Mm-hmm.
we got to get very creative.
So it sounds like the sales and marketing there was more towards the guest, right? In terms of you trying to sell, this properties as far as like renting them, or was it also homeowner acquisition in the case of that management company that you were in charge of sales and marketing for?
There was an element of managing the homeowner relationship for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
As the director of sales and marketing, though, I dabbled more in contracting, working with all the ski wholesalers, working with all of the OTAs, which are now known as the legacy OTAs.
mm-hmm,
And our general manager focused more on new homeowner acquisition.
mm-hmm,
So I focused on really selling and marketing the properties to
mm-hmm,
those wholesaler outlets. So we did have a direct booking website back then. This was in about 2010, but we didn't get a ton of business out of it. We were seeing a lot of benefit over working with Expedia and Booking.com, and like I mentioned, those ski wholesalers like Ski.com and a lot of international ski wholesalers. That's where we really started getting some traction.
Do you think that there's still a room and a place for, I mean, you're calling them legacy, OTAs, and also like for those wholesalers, like, is it still something that nowadays with, the sort of precedence and scale at which, some of these OTAs have grown, like, are there still, operators that are leveraging those, or has it become so little business that can come from those versus, the larger OTAs where it just no longer makes sense?
There's this saying that I wish I could remember who taught me this many years ago, but you can't get a booking from a website that you're not listed on. And if it
Mm-hmm,
doesn't cost you to list on it until you actually get that booking and are paying a commission, why not list there?
mm-hmm,
So my theory has always been, and even to this day, diversify. Yes, focus on your direct booking website. There's a huge movement on that. Focus on your own marketing, your own remarketing, your own working with your own guests that you've housed and trying to get those repeat stays. But that's all part of the diversification model. So if you're not on some of those legacy OTAs, you never know what kind of bookings might come through those channels. So if you can work with the right type of provider, you can be diversified pretty easily without a whole lot of effort.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And, I feel like it also kind of depends on the product that you have, like the kind of inventory that you have, and there's channels that make sense for certain properties and don't necessarily make sense for others, especially the niche ones. I'm talking like there's MTR specific OTAs, or some that are very luxury specific, or outdoor specific. We've we've had this conversation before here in the show, and it seems like people are divided into like two philosophies when it comes to this. Like those that are of the mindset of like be on all of them, like be on hundreds of listings, because to your point, like you don't pay if you don't get that booking, right? Whereas, there's also the mentality of which, we actually at Angel Host tend to also think more on the side of yes, but there's a limit in the sense that we understand it takes time to learn how to be well positioned at in a certain platform. Like it's not only like putting it out there and you know just hoping for it. Like, yes, that can be done, but the results are probably not going to be ideal, right? Like we know that listing optimization, listing maintenance, staying on top of like updates and upgrades to the algorithms and whatnot. So like, at which point do you recommend people draw a line in terms of like saying, okay, yes, I'm going to be on more OTAs, but at which point does it become too much without it necessarily bringing enough incremental revenue to justify the additional distribution?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to time. And I've worked with a lot of RBOs in the past, and many of them are perfectly happy with not even a direct booking website and only listing on a couple of the more larger OTAs. And they get enough of their business there, and especially after COVID. And as we've seen, a lot of those bookings, that pattern has shifted to where you almost need to diversify, or you need to constantly do maintenance on your listing within those platforms. So either you have the time to do it, or you're paying somebody to help you that's a professional that can help optimize everything on your behalf. But usually those professionals, like similar to what you guys do at Angel Host, that takes time as well. So I can see how people are torn. I've always had more success in diversification instead of more of a focused approach on just a handful of outlets. But I would suspect that with what Angel Host focuses on, you guys are all about the diversification model.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like it depends again on the time. I think you said it perfectly well. It's a matter of time. Do you have the time to be on hundreds of OTAs, or would you rather use that time to be extremely well positioned on a few? And you mentioned, of course, the term RBO. I wasn't that familiar with that term prior, so I asked. So rental by owner, right? So that's I guess where the term also VRBO originally comes from, in a way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a lot of acronyms in this industry. And so
Yes.
for anyone emerging new, I put together a list of all the main acronyms to help describe what they all mean. But yeah, RBO definitely is that rental by owner. They tend to be a more do-it-yourselfer, self-managing host. And when I co-founded ASTRHO with my other co-founders, we had a really long discussion over how do we define the differences between an RBO and, say, a property management company. And the crossover, in our opinion, occurs when you start managing a home on behalf of the actual homeowner. Up until that point, you can be managing all the properties of your own that you want. That makes you an RBO. But as soon as you start managing on behalf of the owner, that makes you a true property manager. I keep using the term vacation rental manager, VRM, because again, that takes in a whole different path of acronyms. A VRM versus a short-term rental manager, STRM. We could go have a whole podcast about that probably.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting. And what do you think is unique about the RBO, like the person that wants to still run their property and is not interested in giving it to a third party manager? Like, what have you found? Because you've done a lot of work around helping RBOs and educating RBOs and connecting them with the right tools and resources. Like what is different about them versus like the one that's going to be interested in giving it on to a property management company?
Well, first off, and I think many people, professionals in our industry know this, but they are the majority. They
Mhm,
are somewhere upwards of 70% of all vacation rental hosts in the US alone.
mhm,
So
mhm,
that's a pretty huge audience to reach, first off.
mhm,
Um, they have that more do-it-yourselfer mindset in many cases. And for most of them, they're not looking to build it into a business where they are managing other people's homes. A
mhm,
lot of them they dabble in it a little bit. They give it a try of managing on behalf of maybe their neighbor or a good friend that sees their successes with their own property.
mhm,
And then they think, no, this is not the right path for me. And they go back to just self-managing. Um,
mhm,
they're also very price conscientious. So when we first launched ASTRHO in 2020, we were charging for membership, and we found that the RBOs wanted to join, but even a small annual membership was a huge obstacle for them to deal with. And so we
mhm,
ended up having tiered memberships, and that's when we really started to see the association grow and flourish. Um, and so they're just very cost conscious. They don't want to have to spend money if they can figure out a way around it or do it themselves.
mhm.
Many of them clean their own properties still because it's too difficult to find a reputable cleaner that can come regularly and not disappoint. So they have that real DIY mindset, it seems.
And it also seems like some of these OTAs, in a way, favor, rental by owners, in the sense that, just from a point of view of like the way that the reviews are calculated, and the fact that when you have more and more properties and you're a property management company, like one bad review in one of your properties can affect your overall profile review score, and then statistically becomes very difficult to maintain those good levels versus the host, where, I mean, just from the fact that there's, let's say, just one property to take care of, well, it's easier to go the extra mile, so to speak. Like, it's easier to, leave the guests, some cookies, or like be very hands-on, be very personable, and which at the same time leads to those, better reviews. And if on top of that they're the majority of the inventory, then they play a very important role in this industry, yet they're not spoken about a lot, like at some of this traditional vacation rental management conferences. So where did the idea of ASTRHO come about, and why did you decide to basically co-found that association, and what does that have to do with the way you see rental by owners playing a role in our space?
It's kind of funny. I say that ASTRHO was one of the greatest things, if not for me, the only great thing that came out of COVID, because
Mm.
uh, I'd previously been working with a lot of RBOs in my position. And then myself and my other co-founders, we were basically all laid off, as many of us were when COVID hit in early 2020. And we didn't want to sit around and wait to see what happened or look for jobs in other industries. We wanted to be proactive. And so um, while working with those owners, they constantly came to me and said, I love what you're doing to help with my hosting business. But I really want to educate myself on the rest of the industry and how I can do things better. And where can I go? They, at that time, weren't allowed to join any of the existing associations. You had to have at least 6 properties to join certain associations. You had to have the intent to become a property management business.
Mhm,
And all the RBOs I was working with didn't ever want to achieve that. They wanted to just keep hosting with their 1, 2, 3 properties and doing it
mhm,
themselves, but they still wanted to be informed. So that was kind of the premise of why we thought about creating ASTRHO, was building a community for those individuals. Maybe they want to professionalize one day, but until then, we can be that resource, because the content and what they want to be educated about and the other people they want to network with,
mhm,
same like-minded types of hosts, That's very different type of content than, if you think about it, a property management company. They're worried about how to speak to their owners and how to do trust accounting and a lot of other topics that true RBOs are just focused on. So that's where the whole brainchild for ASTRHO happened, in creating that resource for them, a true community, connecting the dots. Even those 5 years ago, we didn't have nearly the technology that we have today in this industry. We've come a long way in a short period of time. So trying to connect them to those resources, because there weren't very many options back then.
Yeah. No, for sure. And what are your thoughts on, I haven't explored it as much, but I've heard a lot about it, and I don't know, maybe you have as well. When it comes to Airbnb launched their marketplace to offer services, and it seems like they keep coming up with like features that again are kind of like tailored towards those um, individual hosts, like from trying to almost replicate a PMS and even a dynamic pricing tool within the OTA itself, so that you don't have to, as an individual host, be going crazy with looking at channel managers and PMSs and dynamic pricing tools, but can do it all from the place you're already familiar with, to now this marketplace that is opening up a network of professionals of all kinds. Like, what do you think is going to be the impact of that network, that marketplace that Airbnb is launching now, and do you think it's only something that will benefit RBOs, or do you think that it's something that professional operators could look at as perhaps an opportunity to also promote their services?
Yeah, it's crazy to see Airbnb go down that path, but it is kind of their core model, right? They started out as a couch sharing type of listing platform. And so they've always been very RBO centric, just like VRBO as well. I think it's their way to ensure that they are still reaching their core audience as they were when they originally launched. So by offering more and more services to help these hosts professionalize, it makes sense why Airbnb would do that. It wouldn't surprise me if VRBO starts kind of following suit in a few ways. But like we talked about earlier on, that's the majority of our industry. So a lot of vendors and operators are trying to figure out, how do I target that demographic with my services? Airbnb is making it pretty easy for them, it sounds like, to stick within one platform instead of having to bundle or find resources in 5 different companies. You could just one-stop shop it through Airbnb. So I think it's a smart model. Is it going to really take off? I have to be honest, I don't know where things stand today, if it's a success or not. I'm not sure if Airbnb's really taken the time to report back or give us the truth on how that's unfolding. But it's going to be interesting to watch it continue. If I was an individual host, and I've already told you, my focus would always be to diversify all the different places I list my properties. But if I was the new host emerging and just getting started and knew about Airbnb, that would definitely be very appealing, to just stick with everything, not have to do manual dynamic pricing or go pay a separate company potentially, if I can just do it all within my listing platform.
Yeah, it seems definitely be what they're, of course, trying to push for, to avoid having to share their calendar with other platforms. And so, what challenges are unique to the VRBO? Sorry, the I forgot the abbreviation, but yeah, the rental by owner. Yeah, the RBO. Yeah. That property managers don't think about, that we don't hear about in events like VRMA. Like, what are the challenges? Just like you were saying, like an RBO is not interested in trust accounting, and is not interested in those kinds of topics and challenges, which every other property manager would. Like, what's the other way around to that, in terms of challenges that only RBOs face?
Yeah, it is a different mindset. Even I'm constantly telling people you have to almost take one hat off and put a different hat on to think like they do,
Mm-hmm.
and try to really step into their shoes. What might their challenges be? I think one of the biggest ones right now is bookings are down across the board in most cities, and I think a lot of professional managers might have a little bit more tools to pull out of their toolbox to know what to do in those scenarios. And RBOs, the more I go into the different forums and get feedback, I'm hearing them just kind of shrug their shoulders saying, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to try and wait out the
Mm-hmm.
storm and see what
Mm-hmm.
happens. I think I've done everything they can. But have they gone in and run a sale? So I just booked a vacation rental for an upcoming conference, and it was between a few different properties, and they were all about the same price. And one of them put a 20% off deal as their leader image for a week on the property. I admit it caught my eye. It saved me 20%. That's the one I booked. Those
Mm-hmm.
types of strategies can work for people. It just takes that time. So you either employ a company to help with those on your behalf with that type of listing optimization to get the bookings, to get the eyes on your listing, or you're doing it yourself. So I think those types of strategies are where their minds are going. They're less worried about, like you said, accounting or how do I expand my portfolio, and I'm more just trying to maximize the house property that I have right now. And then on the flip side, maybe they're investing less in upgrading the properties,
Mm-hmm.
and only having to replace as needed instead of doing major upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I travel and almost always stay in vacation rentals. I rarely ever, if I'm at a conference, stay in the conference hotel. And I've traveled the world staying in vacation rentals. And some of the best ones I've ever stayed in are by a self-managing host where they only had that one or maybe two properties total because they have that personalized touch.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem to have the ability and the time to put into making sure that stay and every detail within that property is as best as it can be for the guest experience.
Mm-hmm.
And as a manager, it's really hard to incorporate that all the time and think that way and have that trickle down to all of your staff. But I do feel like that's kind of a pretty big difference. If I see a listing with an individual host versus a management company, a lot of times I'll pick the individual hosts because, again, those details, maybe they leave your first cup of or pot of coffee and some coffee grounds and some filters instead of you having to go out and buy those yourself. That's one huge example that just can make your first morning in a property so much more enjoyable without having to stress about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you're right in that professional operators have a lot of things to learn from the RBO, just like the RBO has a lot of things to learn from the operators as well. And I think that it has to be like they have to be put together in a room, and they have to each recognize that there are things to learn from the other one, because maybe the professional operator is going to look at the RBO and think, oh, they don't know what they're doing, right? They have no idea what they're doing. They just have one property. Well, look at their ratings, and maybe what can we learn about how they're able to get to those kind of ratings. And then the RBO might look at the operator and be like, oh, well, their ratings are not as good, they have no idea what they're doing. But look at the size of their operation. Like, imagine how much control and tools and systems and processes and SOPs they need to have in place in order to be able to run an operation at that scale. So it's interesting because it almost feels like they should be put together in a room and like just allow them to learn from each other.
I think you've just uncovered organically a great conference opportunity. And I'm definitely taking note because VRNation's conference coming up next year. We're doing our planning phases right now. But we're constantly segmenting out these groups. Like RBOs are going into one room and property management companies with up to 50 properties are over here. And then the more enterprise level are in a different room. Why are we not putting them all together to share those best practices in the way that they could translate on both sides? I think that's a fantastic idea.
So tell us more about VRNation and how does that come about, and what's the relationship it has with ASTRHO, and what's the vision and what's your involvement in it as well?
Yeah, definitely. So, well, VRNation, as I think a lot of people are familiar, started as a regional association under the Northwest VRP, or Northwest Vacation Rental Professionals. So, the goal was for 15 different property management company owners to come together and elevate the Pacific Northwest region of the country, similar to other regional associations. And then last April, actually this April, 24, we rebranded and launched to a national association after a lot of thought. And we also wanted to not just tackle the whole country and supporting the industry in ways as needed, but we also wanted to make sure we were appealing to all the different types of hosts. So not just helping those professional property managers, but also helping those self-managing hosts, those that are still seeking any kind of guidance or networking or resources. And so the conversation came up with ASTRHO and VRNation to potentially merge. And that was, I would say, well over a year ago. So things have been underway. We're still in the middle of moving a lot of the technology and the content over to the new VRNation platform. But I think that's one of the coolest parts about what we're doing is we're welcoming hosts of all sizes, whether you're looking to start a business with it or just keep hosting your one property indefinitely. So we're trying to pool all industry resources and have those available for all of those types of hosts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's super interesting, and it's so challenging to run a conference over like year after year, and do it in a way that it still brings something new to the table and something valuable to the table and something insightful to the table. And so, what do you guys, what's your vision in terms of what you're trying to do perhaps differently from what's out there and what we're used to seeing? um just tell us a little bit more about kind of your philosophy when it comes to the kind of conference and association that you want to become.
Yeah, definitely. Our theme this year for the conference is out with the old, in with the bold. And so we really want to make a big splash by going national, by having a centralized location where our conference is hosted and welcome all those different host types. So I would say about 25 to 30% of the content we're presenting is going to be targeted at RBOs as well as property managers. And that's a tall order. That's going to be a fun challenge for sure. One of the things that a lot of people have asked me is, what's the vibe going to be like with your conference? Because previously, and they said, I've been going to your conference for years, and it's always been my favorite. The vibe of it is so intimate and fun and friendly, and like you're just hanging out with all your friends when it comes to vendors and attendees just interacting together. And so we're really focused on making sure we continue that energy going forward. We want to have lots of interaction opportunities, lots of ways to have good conversations. And the number one reason that people go to conferences is for networking. So how do we help orchestrate that on every level? It's a tall order, but we have an amazing advisory board working on planning everything. So I'm really excited about the direction. It's going to make 2026 that much more challenging for us to plan because of all that we're trying to do for next year.
Yeah, exactly. Because you set the bar high, and then in the next year you have to set it even higher. Because now you're comparing yourself against the year before, and it's so challenging in the sense that, I mean, there's only so many topics that we can talk about. Like, we can try to get creative and talk about a topic in a different way or with a different angle, but like basically there's different functions about running a vacation rental property, whether you're running it as a property manager or as a host. And it's like, well, okay, how do you deal with your pricing? How do you deal with your distribution? How do you deal with your operation? How do you deal with your cleaning? And so, like, how do you deal with your financing, your or your underwriting, whatever that might be? And so it's like, once you broke it down into the functions, like, there's only so many things that can be said about, like, best practices to run each function. before you're left having to sort of scratch your head on like, okay, what else can I say? So I guess that's where you get into the mindset component of it as well, the community component of it as well. Advocacy, I think, is also huge when it comes to taking a stand on everything that's happening as far as regulations goes. How do you think through that when you're thinking about like putting together like an educational agenda for an event of the size that you're anticipating?
Yeah, definitely a tall order. So while our executive board is comprised of only vacation rental manager owners, our advisory boards, which we currently have 4, and we're launching 3 new boards next year, those are comprised of vendors in the industry, representatives from vacation rental management companies, and even some RBOs. So we're trying to have a very well-balanced and rounded approach of
Mhm.
everyone contributing to where our association goes, what we focus on, what content we bring into the mix. And so we have a lot of great individuals on our event planning advisory board that attend a ton of conferences, that give us great feedback. And it's not by any means a bashing session. It's truly a productive, hey, here's what worked well, and here's what I saw that was missing that you could bring to the table at your next conference. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of great energy in there. But it is a tall order to try and get that balanced content. So one of the things we did this year, instead of opening up a call for presentation proposals, we selected with our advisory board all of the various different topics we feel need focus on. And then we're going to
Mhm.
put those topics out there and ask companies to submit based on those specific topics instead of
Mhm.
willy-nilly just deciding, well, I'm going to talk about like trust accounting.
Mhm.
No, we've had a lot of talk on that. We're going to now talk about this different aspect of accounting instead, because this is what
Mhm.
people are really asking questions about.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. And when you look ahead, just in the industry as a whole, like what do you think are some of the biggest trends that are affecting our industry as we speak? And when you look ahead, like what are you both excited and worried about?
I'm excited. I want to start with the positive. That's
Okay.
fun, more fun for me. I'm really excited about the professionalization, the standardization pieces. Um, Justin Ford's a good friend of mine, and I still find it insane that he has to go around the country telling people to put a fire extinguisher in the right locations of their vacation rentals.
Hmm.
So that's just the bare minimum of where things should be on a standardization level, all the way up to what your linens are and your linen program. Even if you're just a single property operator, you still are going to need some kind of a linen program plan. So helping them standardize to where they become a well-oiled machine, similar to how the hotels operate, right? They had to figure this out long ago. They had an association holding them to a certain standard of criteria to make sure that safety and cleanliness and everything was addressed.
Hmm.
So that type of standardization is what I'm looking forward to. There's a number of companies really focused on that, and part of our education advisory board is very focused on that and helping cleaners all get certified, safety certified, revenue management certified, even digital marketing certifications. Those types of things are what we're really focused on right now,
Hmm.
so that we can help everybody elevate to a certain standard and that we don't have as many negative guest experiences happen in our industry.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
on the challenging side, I can't help but kind of be watching with a bowl of popcorn what happens with the whole arbitrage and co-hosting aspects. It sounds, I have to admit, I'm not a co-host. I've never been a co-host, so I'm not familiar with how well those are operating. It sounds almost too good to be true, but a lot of people are finding value in that. They don't have the time to focus on everything. Even down to a host that has one property and then they're utilizing a service that does all their operations and all of their cleaning for them. And all they have to worry about is the marketing component because that's their specialty and that's what they're good at and what they like to
Hmm.
focus on. So um, sometimes with the co-hosting side, you focus on what you're good at and then you have a partner handle the other aspect. So it'll be kind of watching with bated breath what happens in that component of the industry. I know there's a couple states that have a real an issue with co-hosting, where you have to be a licensed real estate agent to actually truly host in that state. But the co-hosting is kind of circumnavigating that, and a lot of people are upset about that rule bending that's happening. So there's not a lot of emphasis on that, but it kind of falls underneath that advocacy arm and needs to be talked about. Everybody needs to be in compliance, really. You need to be following rules. You need to be paying your TRT taxes, and you need to be a good neighbor host. That simple.
Yeah. And when it comes to like having to be a license in order to be a host, a licensed agent in order to be a host in the states where that's a need, is that only, and I'm sure it's different state to state, so like if it's too broad of a question, we can skip it, but like, is it only when there's payment processing involved from the host that you start to become sort of entitled to that regulation, or like covered by that regulation, or like the moment that you're even on the listing, you have to be a registered broker or licensed broker?
I think it varies state by state. I know Hawaii is one state where in order to host and get a permit for hosting, you have to be a licensed real estate agent. Similar in Alabama, but I don't know the specifics on how do they enforce that? Are they making sure that whoever's on the listing description as the host is the one with the license? I'm not 100% there. So there's a lot of educating to do on that topic.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I can understand like the logic, like they're trying to make sure that you're a professional of some sort if you're hosting people, but then it's like, is it really the right licensing that you're choosing to use as a criteria? Like, does the fact that you're a licensed broker really make you more qualified to host guests? Or should we be talking about, kind of like you were saying earlier, like certifications that are more industry specific and have those be enforced on a broader level?
I would think as we have more standardization and more educational opportunities for people to have these certifications, that those laws or those requirements in certain states might shift. We might see that happen. But you're right. I completely agree. Just because I'm a real estate agent, it means I maybe went through, yes, formal training on how to do real estate transactions, but what formal training have you done to host? So we could see a big shift there happening in the future as we continue to professionalize.
Yeah, because it seems like, for example, like you were talking about Justin Ford and all the efforts he's doing promoting safety and all of those fundamentals that are so important. And so it almost seems like, maybe I'm wrong, like, but like those certifications are recognized internally, within the industry. Like you would know, okay, this is a management company that takes care of safety towards their guests. But like, how much is it something that guests also recognize, and that guests also sort of consciously try to filter out for? Like, there should be a filter on Airbnb where you can say I don't know, like safety certified, or something like that. I'm sure there's some amenities you can filter out for, and not just on Airbnb. I'm just talking about Airbnb as an example, but you get what I'm saying? Like, because if it doesn't become recognized at a guest facing level, then the impact is not fully there.
Agreed. And you almost need a badge or some kind of a seal of approval saying, I meet all these criteria. My property has been safety inspected. My cleaners are certified cleaners through a accredited program. If you're a property manager, my frontline staff has all been trained formally on how to deal with scenarios of almost every kind. My revenue manager is fully certified and trained based on XYZ criteria. So one of the big initiatives outside of our conference that VRNation is working on is a roadshow series of in-person events next year. It'll be educational. focusing on all these various certifications. So you can bring your whole frontline staff or your whole cleaning staff for a 2-hour period, and they can get through those certifications very quickly in person. And the beginning of those roadshows, we focus a lot on any advocacy issues in the area, spotlight the local alliances that may exist. And if not, here's how you start one. Bringing a deep dive into market analytics through our data partner. Also talking with brokerage locally on what are the opportunities for expanding your portfolio if you're looking to do that. So that's really our big focus in getting back on the education front and working towards that so-called accreditation for properties to hit. Because you're right. When I search for a vacation rental, I make sure there's a CO monitor and a fire extinguisher at the very least. And most booking channels have that filter now, I'm noticing. And that's obviously really important. Everybody should be looking at that. In fact, in my opinion, if it doesn't have those two basic essential safety items, they probably shouldn't be allowed to list on a platform.
And we're seeing a push of the OTAs through like towards more professionalization, and also like they're becoming more strict when it comes to who's allowed to host, even from a reviews perspective. Like, it used to be a thing where you could relaunch a listing, let's say on Airbnb, if you had bad reviews, and that was it. You would kind of overcome or get over your bad rating. But now it's no longer possible. So I like it. It's definitely I think taking us in the right direction as far as like trying to elevate the standards of quality, but it does make it very challenging to compete and to stay afloat. And it's going to be interesting to see what continues to happen. But I think for starters, one thing that we're realizing is that it used to be the case that the OTAs were rewarding good behavior, and that's it. But now they're also punishing severely, bad behavior. Sometimes even unfairly. So the rules of the game are evolving very rapidly, and so it's going to be very exciting to see where this takes us, and how much. It's almost like thinking about like how much government involvement should there be in the world of business. It's kind of like the OTA almost plays a similar role, where it's like you could have them just encourage best practices, but then will that actually allow or make it so that people follow those best practices? Maybe not. But once they enforce it, then it's like you have no choice. But then some people are not happy because then it goes to the other extreme. So it's an interesting balance. Like you want some level of involvement, but not so much control to the point where like you don't have any control over your business, and like you can lose it all from one day to the next, because then it puts you in a very risky situation. And that's where going back to the diversification component that you were talking about earlier, it becomes something to think about more and more.
Yeah, I call it the crash helmet effect, where kids under, I think it's 12 or possibly 16. I'm not sure. I'm apologies, I don't have kids, but that's the rule for kids on any kind of motorbike or bicycle, that they have to wear a crash helmet. And then once you hit a certain age, you can decide whether or not that safety feature is still something you want to continue with. So there's some regulation to a degree, and then it kind of is up to your own personal judgment. Kind of feels like we're almost at that requirement to wear the crash helmet on our bicycles as kids in our industry. And we're going to migrate to how far is that regulation going to go until everybody pushes back and says, no, we like it the Wild West. That's part of why we have vacation rentals and not a bed and breakfast or not a hotel. So it's a tricky balance for sure to try and require certain criteria, but not push too far to where people feel they're pushed into a corner.
No, it's interesting. And what you just said, I think, is brilliant, because like, what if there was a lot of control, both from government and OTAs, up until a certain level, where you would graduate. Now you've proven that you know what you're doing, and now we're gonna let you a little bit looser,
Yeah,
because
we'll let you
you've
fly. We'll see how well
yeah
you do.
yeah
But that level, that degree that everyone's going to have a different opinion on where
hmm
that line is. That's going to be the
hmm
hard part.
yeah, no, exactly. And how do you even measure that? Like, is it number of reviews, number of check-ins, like, successfully that have been completed? And is it the same when it's a host and when it's a property manager? That's really something too that I do think that there should be a different treatment from these OTAs, um, in a way. Like, they should understand the business model of property managers a little bit deeper, to not just roll out features that make sense for the host, but that won't necessarily make much sense for the property managers. But we go back to, the host represents 70-75% of their business. So, if they have
Yeah.
to take a side, unfortunately, well, it's probably going to be towards the host.
It's a tough one because all of the professional managers seem to be listening a little bit more intently on industry feedback and where we're going and trying to contribute. Many of the RBOs are just stay in my lane.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's going well. If I need help, I'll ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the property managers are, hey, I'm finding a lot of success here. Let me share it with you.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is the heart of our industry that I want to continue to promote in this role as an association. It's called competitive collaboration. We can help each other, even though we're direct competitors, elevate the industry, build both of our businesses, and still be friendly. We don't have to have an all for one mentality.
Mm-hmm.
That's what has kept me in this industry pretty much for 25 years. So
Mm-hmm.
I want to spotlight that and bring as much of it back as possible.
I love it. So, Heidi, where can people learn more about the upcoming event? What are the dates? And yeah, how can people reach out if they have questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So VRNation.com is our main website. We do have Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all the fun outlets for social media. We do have a conference page. So we will be in Austin, Texas for our conference in April. It's the 27th and 28th. And the venue is going to be at the JW Marriott right downtown. So very comfortable, very high end, beautiful setting, and really easy to bounce around to any other businesses right there near the conference hall. So we're looking forward to it. We have a lot of great interactive sessions coming up.
Mm-hmm.
We are revamping the Housekeeping Olympics that we did the first annual in April of 24. We'll be doing the second annual in 25, adding another category. So the golden the golden toilet trophy will be up for grabs.
Mm-hmm.
And that type of session, that's what we're really looking to do, is that interactive, get people up out of their seats, having fun, networking, but still having the education component to it.
Love it. Love it. Well, that's very exciting, Heidi. I look forward to seeing you at the event, and at many other events that we always see each other at as well. And so it was great to have you on. Thank you for taking the time, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity. It's always a pleasure.
Yes, likewise. Talk soon. Bye-bye.